and yes, it's the Bald Wonder back again for another video. Before we get into today's video, I have to take a second and say hi to Wyatt. Hi, Wyatt. My nephew found out that I'm a YouTuber, and that was his request that I say his name on one of my videos. Okay, so anyway, hi Wyatt. Listen to your mom and your dad, and listen to Mama and Papa too. Alright, so that's done. Today's video, not really preppy as much, but it definitely can be. I was fortunate enough to know both sets of my grandparents and two sets of my great-grandparents. I made a video last week about tapping into the knowledge that the elders in your family and your group have. But my great-grandparents, they lived until I was in my middle teens, so it wasn't like I was tiny. I had a relationship with them. I can remember them vividly. I remember one of my great-grandfathers used to say all the time, and it's a sage piece of advice, that your education is the one thing that no one can take from you. And that is it, guys. So for you guys out there thinking about college, trade schools, something like that, if you're still in school, these videos are not made for kids, but if you're watching and you're still in school, yeah, get your education, guys. Don't think you're going to get it when you get older, because it ain't going to happen. You're going to use words like ain't and stuff when you talk. But anyway, no, get your education. But anyway, had relationships with them. My grandparents lasted into my 30s. We just lost the last of my grandparents just a couple years ago. I tell you that to tell you this. It was after I was already grown, and when you get older, you start getting interested in your past, your family's past, history in general. I love history. I know I'm a nerd, whatever, I don't care. But I started doing some research, and other people in my family had already done some, but found out, you know, great-great-grandparents, great-great-greats, blah, 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 all that. And I'm looking at the info we have on them, and it's really not much. You know, basically name approximately when and where they were born, if they got married, stuff like that. And I'm like, I would love to know what my ancestors from the 1800s, 1700s, 1600s. Yeah, my family, I can trace one of them back to the late 1600s, so they were like one of the first ones off the boat, right? I would love to know their opinions about different events, what their daily life was like, some of their sage pieces of advice, you know, education's the one thing no one can take from you, and things like that. And that started me keeping a journal. A lot of great people throughout history have kept journals, and that's one of the things that anybody that's interested in history, you really like to read about, because that's their words. That's not some historical event that the journalists or the writers of the day put their own spin on. Those journals, those memoirs, are that person's own words and own feelings. So I started keeping a journal probably, I want to say 3-4 years ago now. Because if I'm wondering what my ancestors, their daily life, things that were going through their head, if I'm interested in that, down the line somebody else will be too. And also, I'm a bigger guy, you guys know that. There is a history of heart problems in the family. Thankfully for me, I'm good to go. Doc checks me out and he's kind of surprised. Yeah, it's the bacon and fried taters diet, you know. Joking aside though, as you get older, you come to accept your own mortality, right? Most of us, I know, my brother and I both, we never thought we'd make it to 30, let alone 40, okay? So it's like, ah, crap, there goes all of our plans. We got to rethink things. But I wanted some sort of journal, something that my kids, I do have, a couple of my kids are younger. If something were to happen right now, they would not have any memories of me. Now, today's a little bit different than it was 200, 150, well, even 20, 30 years ago. We've got video recordings that we can make and stockpile, and I do that. I talk to you guys on here, but a lot of times I'll just make little videos and store them in a different section, so that if something were to happen to me. It's very interesting to go back and read, because we're kind of always changing, right? Yeah, I'm a stubborn old man and I'm set in my ways, but still at the same time, you're different now than you were 10 years ago, right? You're definitely different now than you were 20 years ago. Even for our own benefit, we can go back and look at that and be like, man, what was I thinking, right? You know, all the old pictures of the hairdos, and all the women are like, I have no idea why I did that to my hair, you know. So, kind of the same thing. But it's good to have that info, good to pass on to your future generations. I know that my children right now probably doesn't really concern them too much, but as they get older, things like that, they might be interested in how Daddy felt on 9/11, or, you know, when so-and-so was elected, or, yeah, the coronavirus and all this other stuff. The events in history, and want to know how their ancestors felt about them. So I recommend that to you guys. Take the time. It doesn't take a lot of time. I know some people just aren't into it, and to each their own. I've tried to get my wife to do it, and she just doesn't seem to have time. Her phone is just glued to her hand all the time, and she just can't get the phone to unstick from her hand, right? I love you. Okay. But anyway, it is what it is. And for those of you that have children, and maybe their grandparents are alive, or their great-grandparents, yeah, try to take the time to express to the grandparents and the great-grandparents that it might be nice to leave behind something of themselves in the form of a journal or videos, and express to the kids that, you know, think about questions that you'd like to know about Grammy or Papa or whoever, and they can do kind of like a little interview thing. I remember school, we had to do an interview about somebody who lived during the Great Depression, and my grandfather, he was not yet a man, but you know, an older child when everything hit, and that's who I was going to interview. And I remember I'm expecting all this, you know, oh, we had to eat dirt, you know. And I was talking to my grandfather about it, and he's like, I didn't really think it was that bad. The whole thing, like, they were poor before the Depression. They were already used to growing their own food, raising their own food, hunting, you know, fishing, the whole nine. So when the Depression hit, it really didn't affect them too much. But I also have the stories from a set of great-grandparents I had that they were more in town, not out in the country. And I can't remember if I've said this one on video or not, but my great-grandfather, the same one that, you know, education's one thing that nobody can take from you. He would tell a story about walking up the sidewalk to the house. Him and my great-grandmother both worked at the same place. And at that time, the company owned the housing that the employees lived in. So literally, you didn't have to have a car, you didn't have to have a bicycle, anyway, you could just walk to work because the houses were right next to the factory. And they were fortunate that they had jobs during the Depression, but still, when you got everybody and their brother looking for work, management doesn't have to pay people that much, right? That whole supply and demand thing. But he'd tell me stories about walking up the sidewalk, getting ready to turn into the house, and he could smell the pinto beans cooking, and he just turned right back around and went back to work. I guess they were able to work as much as they wanted, so and he was getting kind of sick and tired of eating pinto beans literally every day because that's what they could afford. So yeah, he just went back to work. But things like that are, at least to me, very interesting. And it's something for our future generations to kind of know who we are, who we were rather, and get a sense of, instead of just our name and date of birth and all that, really get to know who we are. So I do recommend that to you guys. Like I said, not so much preppy on the prepping aspect, but still at the same time, it's about preparing for the future, right? Preparing future generations. And maybe you can instill that sense of preparedness in the next generation and generation after that, because we never know when or if something's going to happen, right? Be it snowstorm, hurricane, or the big one happening, right? So yeah, stress that to those future generations. So thanks a lot, guys. Until next time, talk to you after a while.